Good evening, everyone, and welcome to It's a Crime. Tonight is a very special live stream, one I know many of you have been looking forward to. We're joined by someone who's been on the front lines of the Lori Daybell and Chad Daybell investigation since the beginning, Lieutenant Ray Hermosillo of the Rexburg Police Department. Over the last 5.5 years, Lieutenant Hermosillo has played a critical role building this case, from the first missing persons reports to the heartbreaking discoveries of the children on Chad Daybell's property, to taking the stand in multiple courtrooms, including Lori's recent trial in Arizona in June. We'll be hearing directly from him tonight about what it's really been like from the investigation to trial and the impact it's had. This is a rare opportunity to hear from someone who lived it, not just read about it and the aftermath. So settle in, send your questions in, and please join me in welcoming Lieutenant Hermosillo. Welcome, Ray. If that's okay, I can call you Ray.
Absolutely. Thanks, Linda, for having me. I'm excited.
Thank you for being here. Really appreciate your time. I'm sure everyone is excited as well to hear from you. We've been watching for 5.5 years and see how this is all unfolding. So we're all excited to have you here. So thank you.
Thank you.
So I'd like to frame tonight's show going from the investigation and moving forward. I know your time is precious, so I'm going to do my best to streamline it, but heads up, I do like to talk a lot. And so I'll take some questions from the viewers as well. So I'm going to try and be mindful of your time. So you can take the lead in what you'd like to answer or don't want to answer. Does that sound good?
Perfect. Sounds great.
Okay, so you became a detective, from what I understand, in 2019, but you have a almost 20 years before that, correct?
Correct. Yeah, I started in 2001 with the Rexburg Police Department, just as a patrolman, normal patrolman. And I spent a lot of time there. I never thought I wanted to be a detective. And for the longest time I didn't, but as the years went on and I saw different things, I'm like, man, you know what? I think detective work would be interesting. And so I went over to detectives in July of 2019.
Wow. So you started July, and then a few months later in the investigation, you have this huge investigation. Tell me what that was like in the beginning.
So it was new to me. I worked we had a bank robbery case, an AK-47 bandit is what they called him. And he was robbing banks in various states, 5 or 6 states. He shot some officers in California, and he came to Rexburg and robbed a bank. And I was able to work that case alongside my lieutenant at the time, Ron Ball. And so that was my first taste in investigative work. And then when I came over and I got this case, it was so overwhelming. I felt like I was sinking most of the time because I was brand new, but I knew how to work a case and I knew how to work it thorough and detailed. So that I wasn't worried about. It was just the little odds and the ins and outs of things.
I bet, because, okay, so here you are, you're new to it, you're getting overwhelmed, but you know the process. So you just eye on the prize and just work it, and just don't, like, how did you deal with that? What was like that for you?
So the very beginning, our focus was finding JJ and Tylee. And so that is where I maintain my focus. And when it caught national attention, of course, that's an added stressor because now the entire nation is watching whether small town Rexburg is going to do it right or screw it up. And we had a meeting early on, and my lieutenant had enough faith in me at the time to let me run with this case. And it was all hands on deck when JJ and Tylee were missing. So I don't want to seem like I was running it by myself or doing anything by myself. We had a team of guys doing it. Mm-hmm. But yeah, I was the lead on it, and it was overwhelming. And it was kind of scary. One, because you were looking for JJ and Tylee, and secondly, you had the entire nation watching, and that added that huge stressor to do it right.
Right. And then you had Arizona also looking for things. That was the beginning, right? You had Arizona looking for the Jeep, and then with Tylee and JJ. So what point in the investigation were you like, wait a minute, there is something seriously darker going on?
So I would say initially when I made contact with Alex and Chad at Lori's apartment, based on their answers, I knew something more was going on with JJ. But it wasn't until we had an interview with Ian Pulowski, and we really started hearing about this zombie stuff and kind of their belief system. And then it was like, what the hell is going on? Like,
Right.
we had no clue what to think, if they really believe that stuff. So I would say then I think it took a serious turn.
I could see that too because you're probably going, "Wait a minute, Ian Pulowski just married Melanie Boudreau, then you have Chad and Lori getting married quickly, and then you have the Alex situation with Zulema. And now you're going, you're at the apartments, you're asking Chad and Alex, and you're going, wait a minute, why are they lying about these things that we know or don't know, or if you felt, right? Was that
Right.
like
Yep,
that all
absolutely.
played into it? So, what were some of the biggest investigative challenges besides being overwhelmed behind the scenes that the public really never saw?
Um, there was a lot of challenges. We originally, when we got this case from Gilbert, we weren't told too much information because they didn't know whether Chad and Lori had some ins at the police department. And so a lot of the information it was just brief information. And so we didn't have a lot to go on originally. So we kind of developed all that stuff on our own. Um, but the challenges were it's a small town. You're in an LDS community. Um, these nobody really knew JJ and Tylee because they had just moved there. So there wasn't any neighbors really that we could talk to that would know their whereabouts.
Mhm.
So I would say just not knowing anybody that knew JJ and Tylee and all the family being in a different state, that was the biggest challenge because nobody would talk to us, and anybody that would talk to us wasn't around here.
Right. Yeah, because they're all fresh, right? They moved in September, and then all of a sudden in November, you had the missing persons report or the welfare check on JJ. And so, and you're just looking for a Jeep at first, right? And now you're going, wait a minute, what the heck's going on?
Yeah. Um, I'm getting messages that it's just a black screen.
Are we okay, you guys? Can you see everything okay? Hang on one sec. There might be some interesting things sometimes do go on when we talk about this case. It's really bizarre, but sometimes these things do happen. Make sure everybody's okay. We good, you guys? Yep, you guys are good. Okay, we're all good.
Perfect.
Okay. So yeah, so now you had at that point, you started, and then when did it start to snowball? Obviously, we know about in June. We'll get to that in a minute. But did it start snowballing right away, or what do you think?
No, Linda, it was so slow moving at first because every bit of information we got was a dead end. Because remember, we're operating probably 3 months after everything happened. So the kids go missing and they're murdered in September,
Yeah,
and we don't get really start investigating it till the end of November.
right.
So there was no video that we could pull from different places, everything. So we were operating basically on a cold case, really that we're trying to play catch up, and we're trying to play catch up fast because the media is on this, and so it was hard that way.
Yeah, I could see that because I could see that because now you're going, okay, September, now we're in November, like you said, and now you're like, wait a minute. Now we have a welfare check on a little boy, but you still don't know about Tylee yet.
Right.
And then you find out about Tylee, and then you're going, okay, well, we have Kay. Sorry, my little boy's slipping something underneath the door. This is real life right now. He's my 10-year-old. He's slipping something underneath the door. I'm not sure what he's doing. Sorry about that. Um, and then we fast forward, and obviously, we're not going to get into too much detail, but then it comes to Tylee and JJ being found on the property. And at that point, right before that, let's talk about right before, we have Lori getting arrested. She's in Hawaii. You're finding out she's getting married. And what's going on in that in between, right before the kids are found?
So once we go over to Hawaii and get her put in handcuffs, and then we bring her back, and we have this media frenzy at the court building. Everything kind of goes silent because Chad is now back home. He comes back from Hawaii, and so they're talking every day on the phone for hours on end. And we know Lori's in custody. We know Chad's out. So we would have people kind of surveil Chad a little bit and to see where he's going, to see, because at this point we have very little information and we're
Mhm.
spinning our wheels and we're trying just to figure out any little nugget of information that would lead us to finding JJ and Tylee. So we would have officers, myself included, listen to these phone calls all day long, just trying to get some type of little piece of information. And it was brutal listening to her baby voice and Chad, it was like two junior high kids talking to each other like they're lovebirds. It was disgusting, basically.
You know, I can only imagine because here we only see the little bits of what we endure, not never mind what you guys did. And we still talk to this day about her baby voice and the weirdness that she goes and meets him and immediately says, "Well, we've been together in multiple probations." And I always joke like, it's kind of like the girls are out for a night out and a guy comes up to me and would say that, I'd be like, "Come on, girls, let's go. We're leaving the joint," right? Like it's just creepy. It's
Wait, do that impersonation again.
which one?
The we've been in love in multiple
Yeah,
creations.
we've been in multiple probations.
Yeah, it's
Been married before.
um it was disgusting. And so during that time we were just listening to those phone calls, and it wasn't until really that I remember we were down interviewing Melanie Gibb, and there was me and Rob and Ron Ball, and we got the call about this information on a pet cemetery.
Yes.
And we had one of the FBI agents, Ricky Wright. He would get Alex's geolocation, and we had all that data, and he would cross-check it with times and dates. And so when we got that text messages for the pet cemetery with the raccoon,
Yeah.
and then we had the geolocation stuff, that's, I think, the biggest break. We're like, holy crap, maybe the kids are right there under our noses this entire time. And we had served a search warrant on Chad's place back in January of 2020.
Yep.
But there was like 2 feet of snow on the ground, so there was nothing we could do. Um, but yeah, I would say that's when it really started to pick up speed.
Yeah. So the pet and Tammy's sister was also helping with the pet cemetery location as well, correct? If I remember correctly.
Correct. Yeah. Uh-huh. Yep.
And so there's also at one point Chad tried to get a permit, I think, or something to that effect, wasn't it? Or is that kind of just chitter chatter
No, he tried to get a permit because he was going to put a manufactured home on
over
his
top?
backyard. No, see, a lot of people think that it was over top of where the kids were found. It wasn't going to be over top.
Okay.
It was in a different location, because there was really no way to put a manufactured home where JJ was, and he wanted to be closer to the road, so it wasn't where Tylee or JJ was going were found.
Okay. Okay. Thank you for clearing that up because we hear that and you're going, what is he trying to do? And
Yeah,
um and so one of the things I think about too is when the kids were killed and put into Chad's yard, Tammy was still alive. Um, and so you imagine that like she becomes the next victim and she's going to school working, and then you have Chad, and I always, for some reason, I always think about Chad reveling in the fact that the kids were in the yard. Like I almost picture him looking out the window, and with the smug look on his face, knowing that the kids are there and it's his little secret. do you think that's an accurate thing? Do you feel like that kind of is the epitomizes Chad, or what's your thoughts on him?
Um, I don't think Chad really. I don't think Chad felt that way with it. I know he. Our theory is that he wanted to control who came on the property, and so if he buried the kids there, he can control who was there and who wasn't, right? And originally, when the kids were murdered, it was back in September, and Lori and Chad weren't really a thing then, technically.
Right,
And
technically.
so he's thinking, and she's thinking, well, there's no way they're going to be able to trace this back to. And I don't know what their thought process was because it never made sense to me. Somebody was going to start looking for JJ and Tylee. Um, but yeah, he was all about control. So it could be that. It could be that he was trying to control the narrative with it.
Yeah, it just seemed like just so creepy. I did a earlier video even on as he was young and the weird things that he's done, and it just seems like what a place. And then you put them in there. So now you have the whole team. You guys are gathering the information. You find out about this pet cemetery. We don't have to go into details at all. I don't. In fact, it's good that we don't. I think. But can you tell us about that day and the teamwork and working together to find the kids?
Sure. And that was a huge day. The day before we went out to Chad's place, we had a debrief at our training facility. And there were all the agencies that were going to be there that next day on June 9th. And um, there were probably 6 or 7 different agencies that participated on June 9th. And when we went out there, it was we didn't get any sleep the night before, of course, because we're thinking this has got to be it. We have no other leads. We have no other. Linda, I remember walking aimlessly in the desert for hours with my lieutenant because we were following just cell phone data and geolocation of Alex Cox. And so we walked out there for hours just looking for anything. And and so we had a lot of dead ends up until this point. And it was super frustrating and depressing, but when we got this and we got out there, um yeah, we knew it was going to be a big day. We knew it was going to be a big day. And I don't think we knew it was going to be such a big day until, and I've told this story before, but when we served Chad with the warrant, I looked at my lieutenant. I said, "We're going to know real quick if these kids are here based on his expression
Reaction. Yeah.
and his reaction. Are we going to see, his face flush or carotid artery beating or deep breathing?" And so when we served it, I was really focused in on what he was doing, and I
Mhm.
didn't see any reaction. And I just remember sitting there so discouraged in that front room of Chad's place, like, we're in the wrong spot again. So there was a lot of emotion that morning.
I bet
But it wasn't until Chad started looking over his right shoulder at the
that you
pond
do.
area that we're like, okay, maybe we are on the right spot. So yeah, that morning was frustrating, but then when that happened, I think it got our excitement back up again.
And he also fled at that point, right? So he looked over his shoulder, or was that was before? No, he was in the car. He was in the car at that point. You guys had detained him, right?
So he was free to leave. He just couldn't be on the premises without a police escort, just
Because
for safety purposes.
right. And
And
at what
so
point did he flee?
oh,
But
he was
Chalkfire
looking
doesn't
over.
think he does, but
Yeah, he was looking over his right shoulder,
yep.
and then that led us kind of towards where we were at. And then he went to his daughter's house, Emma's house,
Right.
across the street, and he stayed there for quite a while, probably an hour and a half. It wasn't until we started to finally uncover JJ that's when we heard he was leaving at a high rate of speed. So it was a little while. He could see like his line of sight from her window. He could see straight
Mm.
over to where we were at. So he knew once we were all over there and we started digging, he knew, okay, I'm done. And that's when he fled. not fled, but left.
So now you uncover the kids, and we'll touch back on this, and it's on Chad. They're on Chad Daybell's yard, but then at what point were you like, wait a minute, and you start connecting that Lori's all part of it?
We knew Lori was part of it. We knew that was a team effort. They're on Chad's backyard, but what's the common denominator in this whole thing? It's Lori Vallow. And so Lori was involved with JJ and Tylee, and then Alex, and then Charles, and then Brandon. Like it
Yeah.
was their show, but we knew it wasn't just Chad or it wasn't just Lori. It was going to be a team thing.
And even with the rubric, right? You have the rubric, you have Lori, who's basically anybody that she doesn't like is on Chad's rubric, and then rated dark, right? And then
Right.
Chad's like, oh yeah, no, multiple probations. No, this is really great. And then you have the zombies and the naming and all that, and Lori just smirking through the whole thing.
Yeah, and I was one of the zombies, believe it or not.
Did they name you too?
They did.
Did
Do you want
they?
to hear the clever name?
I 100,000% want to.
So my zombie name was Gladius.
Gladius. I
And
like
and
that.
I was the darkest being
Of
on the
course.
face of the earth, and I was either Cain or Cain's right hand man. And so yeah, and I was immortal too. They couldn't kill me based on
Oh, wow.
their conversations.
Well, this is so interesting to me. It doesn't surprise me that you were the darkest of all because you knew the most truth.
Yeah,
So
probably.
that does not surprise me. And a few people had asked, was Lori very flirty with you even in the beginning when you were first starting to ask questions? Because, she's Lori and
So originally I didn't really ask her any questions. I was talking with Alex and Chad. So in the very beginning, I didn't really talk to Lori until probably until we served her with the indictment for murdering her children. And at that point, yeah, she was giggly and laughing, and she had her pants kind of rolled down.
oh,
Um,
like
yeah. So there wasn't much to the imagination. She had them, and she was, it was disgusting. It was pathetic. It was her attempt to manipulate, right? And she's obviously done that several times,
oh,
um, using that sex appeal that she thought she had to manipulate men. But yeah, that wasn't until the first time. That was in June. No, that was I think it was 2021.
okay.
It was when we got the grand jury indictment
Right.
for murder. So yeah, she didn't want to speak to us at all up until that point. She wasn't flirty at all.
Well, I'm going to get to that in a minute about trial and what happened there. But first, I want to see, do you know what the number one question from my viewers were? Because I asked them, you can ask anything, but there is a common denominator, and almost everyone asked this. So, what do you think the number one question from the viewers was for you?
That's a good question. The number one question, maybe would it be that I was surprised she didn't cross me?
That might be the second one.
Okay.
So, the first one, and this goes to show just how caring everyone in this family, this It's a Crime family is. They want to know, what have you been doing to take care of yourself? And that was number one. It's like a two-part. How do you carry on from a case like this? And what do you do to take care of yourself? And how are the rest of the detectives are? They want to know about your well-being.
Well, that's sweet of them to even think about that. So I appreciate that.
Numerous questions on that same thing.
That's awesome. It was really, really hard for a long time. And I didn't realize how much it affected me initially, but as time went on, I could definitely tell a difference in how I was acting, my thoughts, kind of just going down a darker path. Because when as a police officer, you're trained to see those traumatic scenes, right? I mean, but as a
Sure.
human being, there's nothing that can prepare you for seeing that stuff. And it was the worst of the worst that I've seen in 20 years as a cop. And so I ended up going to therapy and seeing a counselor for a little while. And that helped a little bit. Counseling's not for everybody, but it helped
Sure.
until they started being more interested in the case details than really
Oh,
helping me.
really being a therapist or that's terrible.
So I think the biggest thing for me was being able to talk about it constantly with the people who were out there and being there for each other, because there was a lot of guys that it really screwed up. Tough dudes, big dudes, and it caused a few detectives to retire immediately after because their bucket was just full and they really couldn't cope with a lot after that. And so fortunately I was able to come out of it and talking about it with people and seeing the therapist, kind of helped me. I have a good support system at home, and a good blue family at work. So anytime somebody was feeling down or we needed to talk about something or the PTSD would trigger something, I remember just running on the treadmill in my gym and I would look out the window and I saw a tree kind of shaped similarly to the tree JJ was found under, and immediately your mind goes back to that. And it was tough for a very long time, but I'm doing great. I got a great support system.
And what are some things that you go to the gym to help that of course you have the support system, which is awesome, but are there some things that if someone's watching, maybe they're like, maybe I could do that too, or is there some things that helped aside from
I was starting to be able to recognize when I was getting in that loop and started to recognize, okay, now that's triggered me. A tree or a green bucket just out of the blue or a piece of duct tape would trigger me, and I would start to go back to that. And so I started to be able to recognize, okay, take some breaths,
Yeah.
find something to focus your mind, and I'm able to come out of it a lot quicker than I did before.
Yeah, because it's self-awareness. You recognize those triggers. That's so important, and I really really appreciate how you're able to talk about this, because I think a lot of people don't want to, and I think it's important to that you have got help and the team has got help and you have that support system. I have an ex-husband who's a paramedic for the last 20 years. We have friends that are police officers and firefighters. I know my old neighbor he was retired, so he was a fire chief, and he talked about, sometimes you're in this job and you don't realize just how stressful it is until you're out of it. So you could be in it, coping, being in survival mode, doing the things, and sometimes it's when you stop that it can affect you.
Yeah. And I wanted to go back to Linda, there's this stigma behind first responders with getting help and being traumatized. And when I started 24 years ago now, it was suck it up, kid. You're going to see this for the rest of your career. Go home, have a glass of whiskey, and just
Deal with
suck
it.
it up. Right, deal
Yeah.
with it. Men deal with it that way. And I think it's BS. I it bugs me now, and I was a big proponent in getting and making it mandatory for our guys at the police department to see a counselor once a year, and they didn't have to go in and see or talk. All they had to do was go there, have a piece of paper signed, so you could either go there and not have the stigma of, oh, I saw you at a counselor's office, what are you doing talking? So they could just go and talk or go and get their paper signed if they didn't think there was something they wanted to discuss. But it
Yeah.
gives them the opportunity to go do that. And I want to try and change that stigma in law enforcement, where it's not okay to cry, it's not okay to see a counselor or a therapist. You're a man. That's not what men do. That's BS.
It's the old school kind of. I'm not sure, and you don't have to say your age, but it sounds like the era I grew up in is kind of similar to that, where you're not a man unless you're a tough man, and you don't cry. You just exactly you said, you suck it up. You don't do it. You deal with it on your own, and you know anything else makes you weak, which is so
Right.
not how anyone sees that. But
Yeah. So I want to change that for the new officers that are coming up, my
sure,
new detectives that I'm overseeing. I want to make that so it is part of the future, and because it's a marathon, and being law enforcement is not just a sprint. You're going to be in it for 30 years, and
yeah.
nobody can deal with that crap for 30 years and not have it break them. So I'm glad it's starting to move the other way.
I think that's incredible what you're doing. I think that's is so so important. Like even here in Canada, that I know is like even for the paramedics, they go. There's a bad call. There's several bad calls. You just go into a meeting for like a debriefing or whatever it is, and then that was it. And then they send you on your way.
Yeah.
And so you get a couple of those, and I've seen what happens, and it's not good. And I think that's the most important thing to know too. I guess what other people may not realize in these cases is that you have the suspect, you have the murders, you have the victims, but what about the people working the case? What about the people who are uncovering JJ and Tylee, like yourself and your teammates, and the effect of these idiots and their evil ways makes a ripple effect, not just on the families, the friends, but you guys. And you have to live with what they've done.
Right.
And it's so hard because on one hand, you're like, you know what, Lori and Chad, you come and pick that up, and you go through and sift and do all that. And the other hand is like, don't you dare no go near that. I'm sure that, like, do you relate to that, or is that just me? Am I being ridiculous? Or
No, no, that I mean that's really accurate, and that's why when Lori put her head down when I was first testifying in her trial, and she wanted to leave the courtroom because I was going over autopsy photos of JJ and Tylee and crime scene photos from the backyard when we dug up the children. When she put her head down and pouted and and wouldn't look, I was so freaking mad because it's like, you know what? You forced everybody in this room to look at these photographs. You forced me on my hands and knees out
yeah,
there digging up your children that you brutally murdered, and now you're just going to put your head down and
yes,
refuse to look because you don't want to. I was furious. I was furious. So, yeah, it's just, and it's not just us, it's families. I mean, of our families, right? I'm missing kids' games, my wife having to deal with the PTSD part of it, and
yes.
and now it's trickled into that. It's just it is a huge ripple effect that I don't think people really understand how deep that goes.
Yeah, being an ex-wife of responder, same thing. Like I can see, and you just see it. You just see the ripple effect. Like I said, and I don't think people really know or can fathom, and it's unfair. But this is life, but it's also unfair. So, speaking about you knowing what Lori's done, you having to go through this experience, this traumatic experience, and discovering the children and all that, I want to go to the trial and talk about you being on the witness stand, knowing what you know. But first, before that, Lori called in sick the day before you were on the stand in the Arizona trial with Brandon Boudreaux trial. She tried to say she was sick, but the judge said, "Get your arse into court. You're there." Do you think that she thought you were going to be on the stand that day, and that's why she called in sick? What are your thoughts?
There's a part of me that does think that she did not want me there and did not want to have to deal with me on the stand. And she thought that if she could play this little game, that it wasn't going to happen. Well, we all knew it was going to happen. But I think I knew she played sick. I knew the judge made her get there because I was actually supposed to testify that day, and it kept getting pushed back.
That's right.
Um, so yeah, I think she knew that I knew every single thing she's ever done, and I knew it inside and out. And she did not want to open that door.
I think, well, I know you're right on that one, but I think from our point of view too, what we saw, it was like, oh no, she, I said this off camera with you. She knows you knew the truth, and so there's no way she can fake it. She can't pretend. She can't flip her hair to you. I could just picture. I said this earlier. No, I'm not going to give it away on this clip because I have a clip of you in court that I'm going to play for everybody, and you'll see my reaction to it because we were streaming this 8 hours a day, and we were like, "What is she going to do when Lieutenant Ray Hermosillo takes the stand? What is she going to do?" Because what we were seeing, her pattern was someone who come on the stand who's maybe not as I don't want to say strong, um, not as bold in personality, she would easily go up and start to poke and you know,
Kind of bully.
yeah, and manipulate and jab. What you didn't see too was that she would go on and ask the most asinine questions, like we were talking about the digital data or something else, and she'd be going, "Was I offered apple juice or water?" Oh, okay, and the next one would come up, "Uh-huh, and was I offered water?" And you're going, "This has nothing to do with anything."
Yeah. And I probably yeah, and I couldn't watch any of it. I couldn't watch the
No.
trial before I testified. But I can just see her doing that. I know Lori. I know how she is. I watched her in preliminary hearings. I've watched her in every freaking hearing that we had. I made it a point to be there and sit behind her with the rest of the detectives so she would know we are not going anywhere and we're going to see it through. And I would hear her talk and see her roll her eyes to her attorneys, and that's Lori. It's sad, but that's Lori.
But what do you find in court? Did this surprise you even how she behaved with her smirks? I know you've been to all of them, but let's go back to like when you first saw her, because I think that's the point where it's kind of expected now, but in the beginning, we're like, who is this woman smirking like that in court? Tell me a little bit about that. What do you think?
The first time I saw her really smirking was, I forget what trial it was, or not trial, what motion or what hearing it was. We were up in Fremont, and she would kind of look over her shoulder and see us back there and give that smart ass smirk. Um, and she did it quite a bit, knowing, or when she would walk by, she would kind of smirk at us when she.
Yeah.
It wasn't until she winked at me that really set me. And she winked at me when she got off the death penalty. There was 3 or 4 detectives sitting there, and she walked by when Judge Boyce took the death penalty off, smiled and winked at us as she walked out of court. And I'm thinking, okay, now it's really game on.
Now it's
Like
game. I was just going to say that, game on.
you are not going to get away with this. And so that was right before her trial in Idaho.
Unbelievable. I know we saw it when she was extradited, and then that all began. We saw her doing these little bits, but the smirks, um, then she wants to get out of it by faking being in a wheelchair, and she has to. Oh, she's so sick, right?
Uh,
Like it's just like, oh my gosh, oh, you know. And I can just imagine it irritates the heck out of us here. So I can only imagine for your point of view, because now you're facing her. So you're on the witness stand and she's sitting there objecting, um, left, right, and center. And we see the eye rolls. So we got to bring this in. I want to show. Are you okay if I show this
yeah,
clip?
absolutely, of course.
Okay. It's just a quick clip. So now, but tell everybody at first, your reaction before we talk about this, and I'll show you that you didn't really know, right? That you were, I mean,
No, I didn't. When you're sitting there, you get caught up in the moment, right? And the cameras are so small. Court TV's cameras are so small that you don't really know they're there. And so when you're talking and you're in the middle of testifying and you're looking at her and you're looking at the people in the audience and you're caught up in the moment, when she objected and I'm thinking in my head, "Ugh," and I rolled my eyes and then I caught myself. One time I caught myself and I tried to play it off like, oh, okay, maybe nobody saw that.
no,
Um,
we get everything here.
yeah, it was, you just can't help it because I really didn't realize I was doing it the other times, just the one time I caught myself. So I'm sure I did it multiple times. I've heard.
It was only a few, and some of them were really, really subtle, but it's understandable because obviously you've been through all that and you're looking at a woman who's responsible for it. And the outcome of these children who never get to see the light of day again, and they don't get to grow up, they don't get to have families, they don't get to have any of that. And it's all because of these people and their ridiculous beliefs that have nothing to do with even the religion. It's just their own, um their own evil.
Right.
And and did it surprise you that she represented herself, or you're like, of course she did?
No, I figured she would just because in her trial in Idaho, she wasn't happy with what her attorneys kind of were doing. And she made that obvious when she was sitting between them. She would get irritated when they wouldn't do something she asked them to do.
Yeah.
And they had her best interest at heart and they did good. Jim Archibald's a friend of mine. I think he does fantastic. Um, but she didn't like the way he handled stuff. She didn't like how he would badmouth Chad in closing arguments. She would. So I knew when she said she was going to represent herself, she wanted that control. She
Sure.
wanted to question people the way she thought. She wanted to have that control, and so I knew, yeah. When she said that, I'm like, well, of course, Lori's going to do
Yeah.
Lori.
And she wants to now help all the people in prison now, the women, to really have their rights. So what happens, she's going to help them guide that. And so while we're watching the trial, we're like, oh, you can guide them all you want. Like, I don't know what you're going to guide them on. Apple juice and apple juice and water. And if she had some cookies, it was funny because one of the detectives from Arizona, I believe, she was asking one of them, she was asking about what did you do? And she's going through the timeline, but not really. And at one point, he's just like, well, it was half past my chocolate milk. That's how long it took. Like, it was that, because it was just, she'd ask the same questions over and over for 4 hours. So we were all shocked when we really, really wanted her to cross you. We really did. Did you really want her to cross you?
I was torn. I, I was prepared for anything she had to say, and like I said, I knew that case inside and out, and um, I was ready for her. When she didn't, I was kind of disappointed because I had prepared for that cross. And I thought now was the time because I thought for sure, well, it was probably 50-50. 50% she would cross, 50 she wouldn't. But I think the reason she didn't, one of the reasons, is because she knew everybody wanted her to. Because
Yeah, point.
when she said, no questions, Your Honor, and that little breathy voice, she kind of looked back and smiled at the crowd.
I saw that.
So I think part of it was that was her last. Okay, you think I'm going to get you guys as much
Yeah,
as
and
I.
it's the opposite of what you want. Yeah, yeah. I saw that. We said 50-50 too, because we thought, well, she could, if she's spicy today, she's gonna go for it and just give the jabs. Interestingly, and I don't know if you know this or not, but well, you wouldn't if you're watching anyways, Chad likes to wear his red tie on certain days. And
Yeah.
Lori, when you were on there, was wearing her red glasses. I thought that was interesting because, red for murder kind of thing. It did not surprise me because it didn't go with her outfit. And Lori, that would have went with her outfit, and she wore
Right.
red that day. She does like to do that. But let's play. We're gonna play the clip, okay? And then we'll come back. So we have to do this. Okay, hang on. So here I am on the left. I'm just running home from picking up my son from school, and we're in this. Let's see. I'm gonna play it.
Do you recognize all of those as photos of sort of the indicia of Alex Cox, as well as the various weapons that were located in the garage of Unit 175?
Yes, ma'am.
The state will move to admit 139 through 159.
Any objection?
Just cumulative, Your Honor. There's like 20 something of those. I don't know how many they actually need.
Can I look at them?
I love the look on his face. He's looking at Lori like, yeah, that's how many weapons you had. I love him. I love him. I love him. I just wish we could inch him closer and closer to her and just like, boom, like that. Just like, boom. And she thinks she could be able to talk to him and flirt her way through this. Like, do you work out? Can't wait. Please cross. Please cross. Okay, that was. Hang on, I'll bring you back. We love watching trials. Let's just put it that way. Let's see if we can get you back here. Yeah, so there was Lori. We saw you just a teeny tiny roll your eyes, but
I thought you had the good eye roll up there.
I do have another. I do have another one. Let's do the other one if you're okay. I have the good eye roll. That one was really good. Let's see. That was there. I literally have eye roll. So we started talking about the guns, or you guys did, in the apartment, right?
Right.
I think that's the one. Okay, hang on. I'm gonna bring that back up. We like to always end with some humor. Okay, hang on. It takes me a minute to figure this out sometimes.
It's just a good thing you didn't know what I was thinking.
Oh, that's the next question. So hang on. That's the next question.
Do you recognize all of those as photos of sort of the indicia of Alex Cox, as well as the various weapons that were located in the garage of Unit 175?
Yes, ma'am.
The state will move to admit 139 through 159.
Oh no, that's the same one, isn't it?
Any objection?
Just cumulative, Your Honor. There's like 20 something of those. I don't know how many they actually need.
No, that was the
Can I
same.
look at them?
I love the look on his face. He's looking at Lori like, yeah, that's how many. Okay, hang on. I have another one here. I just got to remember what I did with it. Oh yeah, that's the wrong link. I hope I have the other one. Oh yeah, here it is. You're talking about the Rock Creek apartments. This is where it all started.
Yep.
Okay.
Apartments that we're talking about
Yes, it is.
at 565 Pioneer Road.
Yes, ma'am.
And does that show where Unit 175 is?
It does.
State will move to admit 135.
Any objection?
Just foundation, Your Honor.
135 is admitted.
Did you see that eye roll? Did you catch that?
Yeah.
He literally went like, "Oh Lord." Okay, now this is what I thought you said. No, we'll just gonna take that off. Okay, tell me what you really thought at that point.
I can't without expletives, but I was like, you've got to be kidding me. Like, give me a break. You're playing attorney. You have no idea what you're doing. It's just she likes to hear herself talk. She thinks she's smarter than she is. And so she watched way too many attorney movies or My Cousin Vinny or whatever the show was.
We actually talked about that.
Oh, did you really?
We did. My Cousin Vinny and You Can't Handle the Truth. What's that?
Oh yeah, with Jack Nicholson. I forget what that one was. Yeah, so she watches that, she thinks she's something she's not. And I was just to that point with her over 5 years. I'm like, please, like, get me off here. Let's be done with her.
100%. I mean, like I said, we weren't in it like you are, and we were well sick of it. Well sick of it.
It's a
So
good thing I didn't mouth any words under my breath. That probably that
I
would have
would have
been
caught
worse.
it, right? I would have caught it. I would have been like, "Did you see what he did?" I would have rewound in slow motion.
Yeah, it's a
You
good
did
thing I didn't.
great. You did a great job. I mean,
Thank
to
you.
be under that and the pressure, honestly, we've watched you through all the trials going there, and we always pointed out, there he is, there he is, there he is. And we recognize it, and you and your team. And here we are in this little tiny town of Rexburg, Idaho, and putting these people where they belong, which is in prison and rotting away. And we actually say that we hope that they're haunted every day of their life, but it's a little bit different for them in
Yeah,
what.
and Linda, that's what I wanted to really stress is it. I know I'm kind of the face of this, but there was so many people behind the scenes, behind computers and analysts, and
Yes.
just that were involved and put their heart and soul into this case too. So I want to give those guys their kudos and their props because they worked just as hard. And there were several dudes and women in the backyard of Chad's house that day, and they haven't really had their chance to go out and talk about it. And not that they would, but I want them to know, and they dealt with the same stuff I did. So I want to give a shout out to those guys
Yes.
for their hard work, and I couldn't work with a better group of guys and women.
Yeah, that's incredible. Teamwork makes the dream work.
For sure.
And put the dummies back in where they belong. Let me see here. Oh, one of the things I would like to bring up and ask, Lori had a little play on words. She'd like to jab where she needed to, I guess. And way back when there was the investigation with JJ, the welfare check, she said that that JJ was at a Frozen 2 movie. And what struck me way back then was that you're in Idaho, it's cold there, and at the time she said that, there was 2 frozen children in Chad Daybell's backyard. Now, if we fast forward to Brandon Boudreau, and even Chad Daybell would, phone up about Chad DeBall, and we want a ballpark figure, and they like to do that. One of the things that was in Brandon Boudreau's trial that really struck me was she asked Brandon, "Did you see the little boy?" And she questioned it as if it had to do with his investigation. And I feel like it was a little bit of a jab because Brandon Boudreau's the one, in fact, that identified JJ, correct?
Yeah.
Do you think she was poking the bear, so to speak? Like, or do you think I don't know, she loves her little play on words like Chad does. So I felt like curious what you think about that.
She maybe have done that a little bit with Brandon. I think with the Frozen 2 one, Frozen 2 had just come out. She was under high stress at that point because we were now looking for JJ. She
Yes.
had to come up with something. So off her cuff, she came up with, "Oh, he's at Frozen 2," because it was a popular movie that just came out. So I don't think necessarily that time was she doing a play on words. It ended up probably being that, right? But maybe with Brandon she did because it was no immediate stress level at the time.
And it was irrelevant to ask that.
Yeah.
Real, I mean, it's Lori. What do you
never know, Lori.
Man, that girl. So, wanted to ask you, what's one thing that you hope the public never forgets about JJ, Tylee, Tammy, Charles, or this case?
It's a good question. One thing I hope they never forget about JJ and Tylee and Tammy and Charles is I think that their time was cut way too short, and they were super good souls. And I just think that with all this evil in the world, and she is very evil, those four people were cut short, and everybody that I've talked to absolutely loved them.
Mm-hmm.
And I want the world to remember them for that, for their good hearts, and I want the world to remember that we got justice for them, and everything we did was for them.
Yeah. We saw at the end of Brandon's trial and other trials too, but because it's the most recent, we saw Colby and we saw um, Kay and Brandon and all of them come together. And from what I understand, you're quite close to Colby as well.
Yeah.
Can you don't have to go into detail, but can you describe maybe the dynamic or how this has strengthened maybe your faith in humanity with this, or you bond with them? Like what has, I don't know how to really word it, but I think you know what I'm getting at, right?
Yeah. So, Colby kind of asked me the same question on his podcast, has my feeling changed with my look on humanity and my feeling towards that? And I would say it has, because even though there's so much evil that happened and so many dark things and so much trauma for so many people, you look at the positive relationships that's come out of this, and the
Mhm.
positivity with everybody coming together. And it just reminded me that there's more good in this world than evil, and you can focus on the evil and you will find just the evil part of it.
Yeah,
But if
sure.
you focus on the good parts, um, you can really see the positive, and the way the Lord works on his hand and things. And um, I would say it's strengthened my resolve in humanity, just to watch everybody come together for this family that nobody's met. We
Yeah,
had never met JJ and Tylee or Charles. And
yeah.
it wasn't just the investigators, it was communities and people, and trying to get justice for those victims. So I think that was fantastic, and I'm super proud of everybody. Um, but yeah, it's really strengthened my, because you can become jaded, right? Working as a cop for 20 years, you see nothing but negativity, and I was to that point, I think, until this case happened, and to see that the world kind of come together for them was
Yeah, it's incredible. I think that that's such an important point too, like to look at the positive, and love is healing, right? Love is healing. So you find the joy in the little things, you find the joy in healing and love and new relationships. And I guess that's the best thing that that can come from it, really.
absolutely. Yep.
And coming together, I see that a lot. And I think too, from what I understand, just doing this for the last 5.5 years, is uh, the worst place for families to be is in limbo and not knowing where their family is, what's happened. And I think that's what I've been told anyways from previous cases or the family that I've talked to, that they say, Linda, limbo is hell. And once you get answers, um, at least there's answers. Would you agree with that?
I would, yeah. We had a case up here, a Dior Coons case. I don't know if you've ever heard of that case,
Yep.
where that little boy still hasn't been located. And that was one of our biggest fears as investigators was, are we going to be able to solve this and find these missing kids? And yeah, because I couldn't even imagine retiring and not having an answer, or not having an arrest on the murders, and not being able to find them and put them, in their proper resting spot. It was so hard for us to leave Tylee in the ground that night on January or June 9th, when we had to
Yeah.
come back on June 10th. Everybody kind of struggled with it, because we knew she was there. We had part of her out, and it was heart-wrenching to just leave her sit in the ground there. And so
Mhm.
to not ever find them, yeah, I think it would be horrific.
Yeah. And then, um, I just lost what I was going to ask, but yeah, I mean, to that point too, when you're doing that investigation, before you even found the kids, did you find that you were ruminating all day, all night, wake up in the middle of the night, like, how can I figure this out? Where can I find them? Was it something like that, or could you actually just go, oh, please just let me go to sleep for a minute? Or
No, it was from the very beginning. And I said this on Colby's. I remember sitting there on Christmas morning with my family, and it had been 5 days since we went public with the missing kids. And it had been since November 26th of 2019 since I went over there. So it had been about a month. And I just remember watching my kids open presents, and my wife's there, and I'm thinking, where are those kids? Like my body was there, my mind was at work. And it was like that all the time. I would sit out back, or it just, your mind was racing. My wife would ask me questions, and
yeah,
I'd be like, "Well, what'd you say?" And she's like, "I just asked you this," but I wasn't listening. I was thinking about that the entire time, and so were all the other investigators.
mhm.
So it was nonstop trying to figure out where the kids were. I didn't sleep much. Um, it was on your forefront of your mind all the time.
Yeah, I can only imagine. Not only that, just like it's 5 years, 5.5 years. A good what? It was 8 months before they were found. Since
Yeah.
yeah, 8 or 9 months from when it happened, and then going through that. And do you feel like now that you can rest your head a little bit and move forward? I mean, or do you still have times where you still struggle? You don't have to answer that, but if you're open to that.
No, there are times definitely that I struggle. Um, they're few and far between now as opposed to earlier.
Yeah.
But there's times you're talking about it and you start to get choked up and you have to stop talking and kind of gather yourself for a second. But yeah, I'm excited for the new chapter. I feel like we did this right as an investigative team. The the way all these agencies work together, I couldn't be more proud of those guys. And so I'm excited for the new chapter to close this book. Um, we have so many more friendships and family members that we consider family now.
Yeah.
I'm excited for the future, and hopefully, knock on wood, that we never get a case like this again.
Yeah, no kidding.
At
No,
least in the 4.5 years I have left.
right? Get through that, and then just nice, easy
Absolutely.
peasy, please. Just nice, easy
Yeah.
peasy. One of the viewers asked if you were going to write a book. They were interested if you were going to write a book. Have you ever thought about that?
I have thought about that. I'm not sure if I will. It's definitely crossed my mind. I did, and I'll tell you this. I haven't told anybody this actually. I have kind of kept a journal
Good.
of, because I didn't want to forget certain events. And there's a lot of behind the scenes things that really nobody knows about. Things that happened in Hawaii, things that happened here that would be fairly interesting to talk about at some point. I don't know when that point is yet, though.
Did you find it cathartic? Did you find it healing to even just get it on the paper, so it's from brain to paper, and rest your head? Or was it just something that, like, you just had this thing like, I gotta get it on paper, I just have to write this down?
Yeah, it wasn't really cathartic. It was just, I don't want to forget these little details. Someday this is going to make an interesting story.
Yeah.
and and so I would just jot down kind of the things that happened as they happened. I
Yeah.
really haven't kept it for probably since 2021, but I have everything up until then, which is basically a lot of the juicy part of the investigation
Sure.
and all those little things. So I don't know when I'll release that, if I will do a book or not. but I've
Might
definitely thought about it.
might take you 5 more years to even just write it because of all the details. I mean, this is bananas where you have all these moving parts and moving, like how many people involved and this and that and locations, like you said, and everything. It was just massive, absolutely massive. So we're going to
Yeah.
take a couple questions and
Okay.
then we can wrap it. We won't take up too much of your time, but there's a couple questions people had. Baby Cakes 420 says, Ray, did you want to vomit listening to her statement after Idaho conviction?
At the sentencing, yes, but I knew that was Lori. As soon as she opened her mouth and she went into that verbiage, she went down that road. That is things I heard on her jail phone calls
Right.
the entire time. So I would listen to her talk to Chad that way. I would listen to her talk to other people, and it was kind of along those lines. So as soon as she started with that, I'm sure I rolled my eyes in the back of the courtroom like, here we go. But I've listened to that for a long time, so I wasn't surprised.
Do you know, I always have this saying where I say I rolled my eyes so far in the back of my head that I could see Idaho, and I'm in Canada, right? So I always say that, like, I rolled them so far I could see Idaho.
That's
Something
probably what I did. Yeah.
right. Crystal asks, who gave you the creeps more, Alex, Lori, or Chad? The eye rolls in Brandon's trial, I was cheer the eye rolls. Yeah, great job. We were all like, woo. We did. We were.
I would say probably that gave me the creeps more, probably Alex. You know, Chad's he's a dud. He's a nobody. He's just a loser to me. So he really didn't give me the creeps. I think it was Alex because when I would talk to Alex, I can see that 1,000-yard stare. I knew what he was capable of. And you have to be blank in your head to be able to do that to children. And so when I would talk to Alex that time, I would get the creeps from him and I'd kind of give us more distance. But definitely Alex over Chad and Lori.
So interesting on that. And from the outside public view, we don't really see a lot because, I mean, he was gone by December 12th, the day after Tammy, interestingly, was exhumed. That was very interesting. Yeah, it's very interesting. Now, the question that everyone has is about Melanie Boudreau. And I know that in the trial, and everybody's going to be asking this, I'm sure they've asked already. We know in trial that they mentioned that this is an ongoing investigation. So we are going to be very respectful and we are not going to bring up Melanie Boudreau / Pulowski for the integrity of the investigation, just in case you're or anybody else is investigating it. So just so everybody knows, we're going to be respectful and, integrity is important.
I will say this, Linda. I was pleased to hear that in the trial. But yeah, have me back on once and if that is ever brought to justice. And I'd love to talk about that.
Well, we here would love to talk about that too. I have done several videos on that. And we have always talked about what the heck, why hasn't this, why hasn't that? So if and when it happens, we will definitely have you back and talk about that, I'm sure.
Because a lot of people don't know that on December 3rd, I actually interviewed her at the police department for about 3 hours. And
Interesting.
a lot of people don't know that, but there was a lot of interesting things said during that interview that maybe one day I'll be able to discuss.
I bet, and I cannot wait for that.
It's like a cliffhanger, huh, for everybody.
It is a cliffhanger because let me tell you, I've been ripping stuff and discrepancies and all this and going through the timeline. And I have a one video that I talk about the holiday huddle in November where they're all together and this and that. So I rip strips into all of them. That's one of my pleasures and passions is to rip apart the details. I don't know if you can answer this, but we're gonna ask anyways. Do you think that Gilbert PD dropped the ball when it came to? I'm assuming she's talking about Charles.
I have some friends down at Gilbert, and it wasn't Gilbert that handled Charles. It was Chandler.
That's right,
Gilbert handled Brandon.
Brendan.
So I'm wondering if she meant Chandler, maybe. But I'm not going to comment on any other officers and how they handle things. I just, I'll let you guys decide what your feelings are with that, but I'm not going to comment.
Thank you. Anybody else have some questions? While we're looking, I'm going to ask you this. So I have a motto that there's two mottos that I go by. The truth is in the details, and people have patterns. Do you have a motto or saying that you go by?
You know, probably not. There's no motto or saying that I go by. I just always try to do the right thing. Yeah, and so there's really no motto, I guess. No.
Just go by, yeah. I mean, like you said earlier,
I guess maybe trust your gut. That's what I would say.
that is a big thing. I want to touch on that for a sec, just because we had an instance with my little boy 6 months ago in a bookstore, and he went to go to the washroom, and it was taking a little bit longer than I liked. And I thought, well, maybe he's just doing, what he needs to do. And then a guy came out of the bathroom, and my gut, I've never experienced this before, but my gut, it was like somebody yanked everything out of me. I ran to the door and I called for him. And he came out and he said, "I'm so sorry, Mommy, that I didn't come out the sooner. I locked the thing in the stall because the guy gave me the weirdest feeling in my tummy." And I said to him, I had a long talk with him, and I got the same thing, which is crazy, right? So he came out. We had a long talk about trust your gut. I said, "This is your personal alarm, buddy. That's what that is. It's your personal alarm, and it doesn't steer you wrong ever."
Right. And I would say that's the biggest thing in any situation is trust your gut, because you can tell when something's not right.
100%. Everything, I mean, even as a woman's point of view, like if we're out and we get this creepy feeling or whatever, like a Chad Daybell was telling us about multiple probations, we get the tingles in the back of your neck, and we know. And we might not be able to put our finger on it, but we kind of have that little intuitive nudge, is like something is not right.
Yeah, and I think women have a good judge of character for the most part. And so yeah, I would say that for everybody. It's just when something is not right, and even like you said, even though you can't put your finger on it,
Yeah.
go with your gut all the time.
It doesn't steer you wrong. This is a personal alarm, right?
Yep.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
One or two more questions and we can hop off. Do they think there are others like Joe Ryan?
I can't comment on that. I haven't been told of any other investigations going on.
Do you wonder though, with their history of what you've investigated, do you ever wonder if there was something else going on?
Well, yeah, for sure. Yeah, for sure. You always wonder if Joe Ryan was one of their first victims. Absolutely. And unfortunately, I don't think we're ever going to know the answer to that. But yeah, it's always in the back of your head. And yeah, because the circumstances which he was found, and just some different things. Alex tasing him, and
Lori's still there, not yeah.
Yeah. So I always wonder about that.
You just gotta wonder, especially with the behavior. Like one more question that I have. This goes back to just the apartments. Here's what's weird, and I've been wondering about this for a long time. Apartment 107 and 175.
Okay.
The nicer apartment was 107 than 175. Why did Lori pick 175 rather than, or is there something we kind of don't know? Because I know 175, Lori lived in it, but wasn't Alex's name on that and it was swapped?
Well, I mean, what do you mean nicer? Because to me, they look just the same.
When I went through the pictures a couple years ago, I remember thinking, I wouldn't pick something like that. She picked 107, not 175. I don't know. Had the nicer bathroom, I think.
Oh, they could have. Yeah. So Alex was on apartment 175. Lori was on 107, and they did live in different ones.
Why? Why do
You
that?
know, I think just to throw people off. If she really believed people were after her, if she was really trying to cover her tracks, I
Yeah,
think that was her best bet.
kind of like how she wrote Lori Ryan getting the um, storage unit and whatnot.
Yeah,
Did
she's
you
super
start to think?
sneaky.
Pardon me?
She's super sneaky, right?
Right? Were you at one point going like, can these guys get any dumber? In
You
some
know,
aspects,
I think initially everybody gave them more credit than what they deserved. Just
yeah.
because we were coming up with all these dead ends and we were playing the late game, but ultimately we found they really weren't that smart.
No, and I said, thank goodness for that.
Yeah.
That they were, in a lot of ways, they were dumb.
Yeah.
Like carrying Alex's cell phone around. Like in
But it's interesting too, like you could look at that two ways. You could look at it like if we need somebody to take the fall, it's going to be Alex because all our geolocation data was on Alex.
right,
We didn't have hardly any on Chad or Lori.
right,
So really, I mean, they were at least smart enough to turn theirs off,
right.
and maybe they kind of used him as a scapegoat. But yeah, I mean, you could look at that both ways, I think.
Do you think it was weird about the timing of Alex's death?
I do think it's weird. Do I think anybody had a hand in it? No, I don't.
Okay, so you just thought
Just
it's weird.
because I'll tell you why. I'll
Yeah,
tell you why. When I was going over his Google searches from before he was sick, before the time he died, he was Googling a couple weeks prior, why am I short of breath? I'm feeling tired. Googling symptoms.
Yes.
We listened to phone calls with him and Chad and Lori and Melanie Boudreau, and he was wanting to come up and get some things, and he ended up saying, you know what, I'm not going to come up this week. I don't feel good. So I don't think there was anybody that really had a hand in it. I think maybe if anybody had a hand in it, it was the good Lord himself. But
Right. Take him out.
But yeah, I don't think anybody else really had a hand in that, just because he was Googling that stuff. And I think I said this before on the podcast. I think he was one of the first victims of COVID because it was starting to get really popular then, and
Yeah.
it was in December, and I know he was traveling. He went into Mexico, and he died of that pulmonary embolism, which is a symptom of COVID too. He didn't have the best health, so I wonder if he was part of that.
Yeah, well, he's sad a lot too, being a trucker and all that. Except he had an odd affinity to fast food joints after he did some bad things.
He did. It's disgusting, right?
It really is. I mean, all of it is disgusting. So I want to thank you so much for being on here. It's been absolute pleasure to have you on. I'm looking forward to you coming on again, if you will.
Absolutely. I had a blast. Thank you so much. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you so much. So we're going to end the stream and sit tight because I think it's going to bring you backstage. We'll have a little
Okay.
chit chat.
right.
But thank you so much, everyone. Thank you for being here. Thanks for watching. And we'll see you soon.
Awesome. Thanks, guys.
Good night.